Welcome to the Shema Podcast, the podcast for the perplexed, where Torah insights, intertwined through personal stories, as well as interviews with leading Torah scholars, demonstrate the empowering qualities of Torah and mitzvot. Now to the show.
Welcome back, my friends, to another episode of the Shema Podcast for the perplexed. This is the week, the character trait of Gevurah, of din, of judgment, of discipline. And I have the perfect teaching on this subject, courtesy of Avi Roth. But let me step back for a moment before we zoom in on this area. The purpose of working on each of our character traits leading up to Shavuos is that one of the things that we can become enslaved to is our emotions. There is a proper path on the way in which we internalize the events around us, and a proper path that's in alignment with Hashem on the way we interact with others. And without proper training, we can let our emotions guide our behaviors. We are not supposed to let our emotions dictate our behavior. Just because we get out on the wrong side of the bed one morning is not an excuse for not acting in the proper way towards those around us, and certainly when it comes to our connection with our Creator, not internalizing things in the proper way. What are those? The areas of exile we want to free ourselves from, which I'll repeat again. One, which is knowing that everything that is happening around us is being orchestrated by Hashem. Two, that everything he does is out of love, and that everything he does and is orchestrating out of love to help cultivate within us our true essence, our neshama, to bring it out into the world. So Avi Roth was in town for the second days, visiting family, and I said, we got to get together. So he came by last Friday before Shabbos, and we were sitting here in my office schmoozing, and he brought up an interesting question. He said, what happened to all the converts that Avraham and Sarah cultivated? They weren't converting to Judaism, there was no Torah, but they were getting everyone they could meet with to convert to the idea of monotheism, that there is only one power in the world. And I was intrigued by the question. I was curious about, what happened to them? But I will tell you, when I researched it, it contained the most profound wisdom, and it speaks specifically to this trait of Gevurah and how we can harness it in our development, in our personal spiritual growth, but it also aids us in helping other Jews come back to Hashem through his Torah. And those things are all interconnected as we are so intertwined with one another. The more we help others, the more it helps each of us. But there's a proper way to do kiruv, to reach out to Jews who are estranged, who are unfamiliar with their Torah, unfamiliar with the definition of Hashem. There's a proper path to do this. So the verse in the written Torah in Bereshit says, "And the souls they made in Haran." Now, this verse is referring to two things happening simultaneously, one in the spiritual realm and one in the physical realm. What was occurring in the spiritual realm, which is not really a part of this lesson, but it's something important to understand too in the area of Emunah, is the entire time that Avraham and Sarah were attempting to have children, that there was a reason why Hashem was delaying that until their much older age. Because the entire time they were engaged in trying to have children, they were creating all these very lofty souls. And those are the souls of the converts. That is why when my wife Shauna converted and became Elisheva, she became Elisheva bas Avraham and Sarah. When my daughter Elsie converted and became Yonah, she became Yonah bas Avraham and Sarah. And that is why she is a daughter of Avraham and Sarah, because of this very reason. But there was also something happening in the physical realm. They were bringing people close to Hashem. They were getting them to understand definitionally who is the Creator, and that the purpose of creation was he wants a relationship with mankind. But then there's nothing else mentioned. However, in the Midrash, it continues and says, when they saw that Sarah died, they left Avraham's path. So let's find out exactly what happened. Why did all these souls, these individuals, they brought to monotheism, they just disbanded and left it and went back to their old lives and their old belief systems? Let's first understand these character traits that the forefathers embodied. They acted as a chariot for Hashem, totally negating the ego and perfecting a particular midos, a particular emotional trait. Avraham perfected chesed, kindness. That's why he was always out doing acts of kindness, opening their tent, welcoming people in, serving them food. And then when they tried to thank him and Sarah for their hospitality, he would get them to thank Hashem. Yitzchak, this week's trait, he embodied Gevurah, din, inner strength, structure. Yitzchak never left Israel, meaning he was not out and about like his parents, Avraham and Sarah, out trying to influence them. He worked entirely on himself, disciplining himself, learning Torah, refining his inner qualities. It was all very internal work. And then Yitzchak has Yokov, the father of the 12 tribes in the Jewish people, and he represented Tiferes, beauty, compassion. He refined both those qualities to bring the light of Hashem to the world, but also to do it within a structured way. Not only did Yokov develop within himself a structured means to hold the chesed, the kindness, but it also means how chesed is delivered to the world around you. Yokov did not go out and talk to everyone, trying to bring them to an understanding of God. He focused that on his 12 sons, the future 12 tribes of Israel. And you may ask, well, why did he just keep it to his children and their children and the future generations of the Jewish people? And the reason is because it was not time. This is why Yokov focused this balanced effort of chesed and Gevurah to his children and the future generations of Israel. So when you look at Avraham and Sarah's methodology for reaching out to other people and bringing them close to God, they were fully embodying this idea of chesed, which is welcoming others, which is love and a non-judgmental connection. And this is an amazing way to bring people close. This is what you see happening in Gevurah today. But what the commentators say is that because they did not bring any Gevurah, any structure of their own, these people became spiritually dependent on Avraham and Sarah. Their charismatic personalities, their warmth, their love, inviting them in, providing them all this inspiration. They continue to show up to receive this kindness and inspiration, but it just made them spiritually dependent. And that is why when Sarah died and Avraham became occupied with bearing and mourning Sarah, and they had no one there to continually inspire them, they left. And that's an extremely powerful lesson for all of us. This is one of the struggles Gevurah has. I know many people who go to classes, and they've been going to classes at all Jewish outreach organizations like Torch, like Chabad, all these places. And I've heard that there's Jews that have been going there for 20 years, 30 years, getting inspired. The problem is they are not picking up and doing any of the mitzvos. And what's the problem with that? The problem is the mitzvos and the way to implement them through all the halachos. That is what grounds someone and builds a foundation of spirituality that is not dependent on another. That is the beauty of what we got at Mount Sinai, the Torah, the 613 mitzvos and how to apply them. They allowed each of us to build a foundation of spirituality that was not dependent on someone's inspiration. Think of Chesed is the spark of inspiration, Gevurah is the vessel, and Tiferes, when they're combined together, creates that enduring flame that doesn't need someone else to constantly reignite it. It holds on its own. I'll give you an example of this. In business, I read a lot of research in the area of sales on inspiring people. And it said that from all these different studies is that inspiration has a 72-hour shelf life. From once someone gets inspired, that inspiration begins to depreciate at an accelerated pace. I remember being asked to speak at a conference, and I was able to inspire the audience. And afterwards, everyone came up to me and gave me their business cards and said, "We really want to talk." So later that day, as I was meeting with the sales team, I handed out the cards to people in their respective territories. And the sales guys were very excited, like, "Dan, this is amazing. This is a lot of business we can get out of this situation." And I said, you have 72 hours to act on that, because in 72 hours, they are not going to remember why they wanted to talk to us. And this is us with our Yiddishkeit and our personal growth. One of the things I shared at the Pesach table that I had learned last week was a teaching from Rabbi Nachman regarding Emunah, which of course was the central theme of the evening. And Rabbi Nachman taught that the way he was able to free himself from the Yetzer Hara was when he learned the domain, and the only domain that the Yetzer Hara has control over. And he said that is in the area of imagination, which if you contemplate that makes total sense. We've talked about the idea that there is two parallel worlds, one where our body originates from the Sitra Achra, the will to receive, and the spiritual realm and our neshama that come from the will to bestow. And our job through the fusion of soul and body is to elevate ourselves in the world around us to a will to bestow. When our imagination is focused on something negative about ourselves, someone else, or a situation, our imagination is stuck in the Sitra Achra. That is a sign that your imagination is trapped. When you find yourself worrying about things and how will this work out and what if this happens and what if that happens, your imagination is trapped in the Sitra Achra. And he said that Emunah is the imagination when it is placed in the realm of the Sitra Kedusha. Because what is Emunah? It is using the imagination to not know how things will work out, but to know that they will. That's why it's beyond logic and reason. That is what Hashem wanted to teach us when he told us to walk through the sea of reeds. It logically made no sense. He did not tell us that the seas would split. He just said to walk through the sea. Logically, that makes no sense. We knew how the body functions and how it needs air. Logically, we would just drown. But he wanted us to use our imagination to elevate it to the realm of the Sitra Kedusha, to know that Hashem said to walk this way, and we don't need to understand how that will work out. We just need to understand that it will. But one of the things Rabbi Nachman says, in order to elevate the imagination and free it from the grips of the Sitra Achra, is through the study of Gemara with a Chavrusa. Because what is happening when you're studying the arguments back and forth in the Gemara? You have to use your imagination to look at both sides of the argument. And so through the exercise of studying Gemara that we are able to free the imagination and elevate it to the realm of the Sitra Kedusha, which is also how we achieve Emunah, to understand things will work out even when we cannot logically understand how they will. Now, this inspired me because I've had a really difficult time finding a Chavrusa to study Gemara with. Either I found someone that wanted to study too late for me. I just keep a different schedule than most people in a From community, going to bed early and waking up early. I finally found someone that said they could work with me during the day and we could study and learn together, but his schedule was way too erratic and we were missing mini study sessions to where weeks would go by without learning together until I just realized that that was not a good fit. But I let it go. I just sort of got busy with life and forgot to continue to pursue this. But that teaching from Rabbi Nachman inspired me. But then we did the podcast with Morty Roth, and he also brought up the importance of having a charusa to study Gevurah with. And I was just, once again, inspired. And after that podcast with Morty, I said to myself, I have to take this inspiration and I have to turn it, actually make it something in my life. Otherwise, it will fade away in 72 hours and 6 months will go by and I will have not accomplished anything. I need to bring some Gevurah, some discipline to this situation. So I did speak to Hashem and tell him I don't know who to reach out to. I don't know who would be a good fit. And then when I was speaking with Avi Roth, I asked if he could learn with me, but his schedule and his occupation is he's working nights and sleeping during the day. But he said, talk to my father, Morty Roth. And that is what ended up happening. And I'm still not going to be settled until our study sessions are locked into my calendar. But that is an idea of knowing that when you get inspiration to do something that you know you need to do to deepen your spiritual growth, that you have to take action in order to solidify it and make it your own. None of us want to stall out in our growth. If you are new to your learning and new to learning about mitzvahs, you always have to be regularly taking on more mitzvah observance. You don't want to be one of those people who listen to podcasts, go to classes, and 20 years later, you're not keeping the pillars of Judaism, which is Shabbos, kosher, family purity, and then for men, wearing tefillin. I know you don't want to do that, but if you continually say, I'll start another day from now, you could end up being one of those people that go to classes forever and ever, but never build their spirituality for themselves. I'll give you an example of a time I did this successfully. I have a dear friend. I didn't ask his permission to tell this story, so I won't say his name. If he's listening, he'll know I'm talking about him. But it's a very special friend I made over the last 3 years. Very special man. We started learning together several years ago. And he wanted to pick up a routine of davening in the morning. And we were going over the Shema. I asked him, do you have tefillin? And do you have a talis? Because to say the Shema, which is a testament to Hashem, where it talks in the first paragraph about wearing tefillin, in the third paragraph about wearing tzitzits, it's like you can't say this prayer without having tefillin and wearing tzitzits. So he said, well, I have some tefillin that I got when I was 13 for my bar mitzvah. But he had not worn them since, and he's in his early 60s. So I told him, you have to bring those to me so I can have Rabbi Grudinsky take a look at them to see if they're still kosher, because the odds are they are not. Those parchments do not stay intact forever. The ink will begin to bleed or fade, and they'll just no longer be kosher. And at first, he did not want to get the tefillin. When he saw the price tag, we all get a little bit of a sticker shock when we first learn how much tefillin are. But I knew I was not going to let up. I continued to push on this matter. If I had just approached it in a loving, non-judgmental way, all chesed, as some of you may think, what is wrong with just chesed and not judging and telling people that you expect things from them? Again, we know what that is. That's why Avraham and Sarah lost all their students, went back to their former life. So I pushed my friend. I was pretty relentless with it. I was not going to let up until he agreed to buy tefillin. And I will tell you that as much as I pressured him and as much as I was on him nonstop to do this until he acquiesced and did it, those tefillin are so precious to him. I am absolutely certain that if you were to ask this man if Dan Coleman ever did any act of kindness towards you, the first thing he would say is he got me to start wearing tefillin. These are so important to his life. They grounded him, gave him his own connection to Hashem. That is his now. And that is where Gevurah steps in. That is when Relationships built through chesed sometimes need to get where the other gets them to embrace boundaries, which is what mitzvah observance is. It's boundaries. It's permitted and prohibited. The laws of halakha is what builds our own foundation of spirituality. Again, that is not contingent on someone inspiring us continually. So there's 3 Torah leaders that wrote a lot about this very question that our friend Avraham brought out. And they used it to teach Kiruv. One was Rav Dessler, who lived from 1892 to 1953. And he said that Kiruv based on inspiration alone leads to dependence, as we discussed. And true giving is helping someone become a giver, not a taker. And that is what the mitzvos are. Like we've discussed, it is what allows us to go from a will to receive to a will to bestow. Rav Hirsch lived between 1808 and 1888. And he taught from this that Torah must be lived with structure. He says as well, inspiration fades, values must be trained. And Rav Soloveitchik lived in the 1900s, and he taught that Kiruv, based off this teaching, must move from emotion, the covenant of fate, to obligation, the covenant of destiny. So again, last week we learned about chesed. It reunites idealism, allows one to reconnect emotionally to Torah. This week, we're learning Gevurah from Yitzchak on how to embrace boundaries, commit to consistent learning and mitzvos observance. And next week, we will focus on the blending of those through Tiferes, embodied by Yokov. If you are new to your observance and you know that your goal is to fulfill the Almighty's will, build your own foundation of connection to Him through the mitzvos. And keeping in mind that it's not, as we mentioned so many times in this podcast, an all or nothing situation. But if you're not keeping Shabbos and you're feeling inspired, and you know that inspiration has 72 hours to fade away, I would like to make a strong recommendation. And that is that you simply begin, as I did when I had Josh Rothstein on. He said the same thing, that the first thing we did is that we said on Shabbos and Yom Tov, we are not going to violate one of 39 creative acts of building by turning our light switches on or off. We'll just determine which lights do we want on and which lights do we want off, and not touch those light switches the entire time. My suggestion to you, my friends, is take that step. Torch did a project many years ago called the Mitzvah Magnets, and I believe there's still quite few in inventory. They're magnets that you put over your light switch cover, so you won't accidentally flip that bathroom switch light off when you're walking out of your bathroom on Shabbos, creating a difficult situation when you have no lights in the bathroom, or turning your bedroom light accidentally on before you go to bed. What you can do is email me at shemapodcastshow@gmail.com. Tell me how many of these mitzvah magnets you would like for those rooms like the bathroom, keeping the lights off in the bedroom, wherever else you really want to make sure you don't accidentally switch the light on or off. And I will mail those to you. But again, this is just one step. You're anchoring in your spirituality for yourself. You're taking the inspiration and turning it into action. I'm not asking you to fulfill all the mitzvos on Shabbos and stop driving, stop using your phone. I'm saying take this one action. Because if you don't take one action, when will you? The other thing I would like to see you do, if you have not picked up any mitzvos observance, is not to begin keeping all the laws of kosher. But what I am asking you to do is just stop eating the pork and shellfish. I don't care if it's in your fridge. Matter of fact, it's better if it's in your fridge. Get a big trash bag, throw it out, and say, I am no longer going to eat those foods. I'll still have treif meat, treif cheese, go to non-kosher restaurants, fine. But I am taking a step. It's no longer going to be a step for another day. It's going to be a step now. That builds a mindset of taking inspiration and turning it into action. So thank you again, Avi Roth, for bringing up a great question in our schmooze session last Friday. It bore the fruit of a great teaching, something that I am going to take with me, that whenever I hear something inspiring, something that I'm not doing that I know I should be doing, that I don't let that inspiration fade. I use my inner strength to create new structure, which builds for me a stronger foundation in my spirituality. And I'm also going to continue to do what I just did, which is for those that I love, that I know I've been learning for a long time, I'm going to sometimes invoke a little Gevurah and say, take a step, begin to do something. It's not all or nothing. Small little steps is always the proper path. If you accept this challenge to begin these two things, no more selfish in pork, no more turning lights on and off on Shabbos or Yom Tov, I would love to hear from you. Again, email me at shemapodcastshow@gmail.com or join our growing WhatsApp community by looking in the show notes and clicking the link. You will find an incredible group of people. They're all supporting each other at all various levels of growth and knowledge. It's a very supportive group that you will find very beneficial, as I have.
Thank you for listening, and if you enjoyed the episode and found it meaningful, please take a moment to rate, review, and share the podcast. To share feedback, suggest future topics, or ask questions for the host or his guests, you can email him at shemapodcastshow@gmail.com. That is shemapodcastshow@gmail.com, or click the show notes to join the growing WhatsApp community.